Have you ever asked yourself, what is the exact line between a savior and a serial killer? Usually, the answer is obvious. But in medicine, that line can be so razor-thin, it becomes invisible. Picture this. You are carrying a parasitic disease. A monster eating you from the inside out. The government arrives, the doctors arrive, and they bring with them a miracle. They line you up. They inject you with a liquid they call salvation. You trust them implicitly. But what you don't know is that the moment that cold steel needle pierces your flesh, it isn't just delivering a cure. It is pumping a silent phantom directly into your bloodstream, something far more terrifying than the disease you are trying to escape. This isn't a horror movie. This is the true story of a colossal medical catastrophe, where good intentions accidentally manufactured a nation of the infected. Welcome to the dark file of The Cursed Cure. To understand this tragedy, we must rewind time not just a few decades, but millennia, back to the banks of the mysterious Nile River. The Nile is the lifeblood of Egypt, bringing water, soil, and harvest. But lurking beneath those murky waters was an ancient curse, schistosomiasis, also known as bilharzia. The enemy here is a microscopic larva hosted by tiny freshwater snails. When farmers waded into the water to tend their fields, the larvae would launch from the snails, burrow through human skin, enter the bloodstream, and ravage the body. For thousands of years, this disease caused severe anemia, organ failure, and bladder cancer in the Egyptian population. Traces of it have even been found in the mummies of pharaohs. It was a national scourge, draining the workforce of an entire country. Then, in 1918, a glimmer of hope appeared. Dr. J.B. Christopherson, a British doctor working at Khartoum Civil Hospital, published a groundbreaking discovery in the medical journal The Lancet. He proved that antimony tartrate, also known as tartar emetic, could kill the parasite. For the first time in history, humanity had a weapon to break the curse of the Nile. From the 1,950 seconds to the early 1,980 seconds, the Egyptian Ministry of Health, with every good intention and extraordinary effort, launched the largest community treatment campaign the world had ever seen. Their goal was noble: eradicate schistosomiasis, liberate the people from pain. Millions of injections were administered every year. Mobile medical units traveled to the most remote villages. The logic of the era was simple. We have the drug, we have the patients. Let's inject everyone. But in the rush to save lives, they overlooked a deadly detail, a detail hidden in the procedure itself. And it was this tiny detail that turned a campaign of salvation into an assembly line of disaster. Visualize yourself as an Egyptian farmer in 1960. You hear the doctors have arrived in your village. You and your family join the queue at dawn. The line stretches for hundreds of meters under the scorching desert sun. When you step into the makeshift clinic, the first thing that greets you isn't comfort, it's the stench of rubbing alcohol mixed with sweat and fear. The treatment was called parenteral antischistosomal therapy, PAT. And the silver bullet being used was tartar emetic, a heavy metal compound of antimony. Why do I call this a nightmare? First, let's talk about the drug itself. Tartar emetic is essentially a poison. In old U.S. patent documents, it was described as a violent emetic. The procedure required an intravenous IV injection. The doctor had to guide that thick steel needle precisely into your vein. The moment the drug hits the bloodstream, the victim tastes a strong, metallic flavor rising in their throat. Seconds later, nausea hits like a tsunami. They vomit violently, purging bile. That was considered a normal side effect. But that wasn't the worst part. If the nurse missed the vein and the drug spilled into the surrounding soft tissue, the result was necrosis. The flesh would literally die, causing excruciating, bone-deep pain. Patients also suffered from antimony cough that tore at their lungs, severe joint pain, and cardiovascular collapse. Statistics showed that for every 1,000 to 20,000 injections, one person would drop dead on the spot from heart failure. However, the horror detail wasn't the toxicity of the drug, it was the needle. At that time, disposable plastic syringes were not common. Standard medical protocol required that after every single patient, the needle kit had to be boiled for sterilization for at least 20 minutes. But look at the reality. A single doctor had to inject 500 people in one morning. If they followed the 20-minute rule, it would take a week to finish a day's work. The pressure of numbers was crushing. They cut corners. Instead of boiling for 20 minutes, they merely rinsed the needles in warm water or dipped them in boiling water for a few seconds. What they couldn't see with the naked eye was that inside the bore of the needle, that tiny hollow space within the steel, there remained microscopic traces of the previous person's blood. And hiding in that blood was an enemy that science at the time didn't even know existed. The hepatitis C virus, HCV, a silent assassin, durable, stubborn, and ruthless. As the needle moved from arm to arm, it acted as a supercharged virus pump. Patient A's blood was injected directly into patient B. Patient B into patient C. The chain of infection ran at full capacity, day after day, year after year, for over 30 years. The people of Egypt thought they were lining up for life. In reality, they were queuing for a suspended death sentence. They endured the pain of antimony, the vomiting, and went home believing they were cured. They didn't know their livers had just been implanted with a biological time bomb. The virus would sleep there, silently destroying liver cells for 20 or 30 years before exploding into cirrhosis or liver cancer. By the 1970 seconds, a medical breakthrough occurred. An oral medication called praziquantel was introduced. It was safer, more effective, and most importantly, no needles. The PAT injection campaigns were phased out and ended completely by the early 1980 seconds. The world let out a sigh of relief. The war on schistosomiasis had changed. But the ghosts of the past do not let go so easily. In the 1990 seconds and 2000s, after global medicine had finally identified the hepatitis C virus discovered in 1989, researchers began to notice a terrifying anomaly in Egypt. Hepatitis C rates in Egypt were abnormally high. While the rest of the world saw infection rates below 1%, in Egypt, the number hit 15%, reaching up to 20% in some rural areas. It was the highest rate in the world. Scientists were baffled. Why? Why Egypt? Then, in March 2000, a bombshell paper was published in The Lancet by Frank C. and colleagues. The title was cold, scientific, but contained a horrific truth. The role of parenteral antischistosomal therapy in the spread of hepatitis C virus in Egypt. The truth was out. The PAT campaign, the great life-saving mission of the past, was the direct cause. It is estimated that 6 to 10 million Egyptians were infected with hepatitis C. Almost all could trace the infection back to those Tartar Emetic injections at village health centers. This remains the largest event of iatrogenic transmission, doctor-caused illness, in modern medical history. A generation of fathers, mothers, and workers survived the parasites, only to waste away from liver failure and cancer decades later. This story is full of darkness, but it does not end in despair. After realizing the catastrophic mistake of the past, Egypt did not look away. In 2018, they launched the 100 Million Healthy Lives campaign. It was the largest public health screening effort in human history. Over 60 million people were tested for free. And more importantly, the 4 million who tested positive were treated for free with new generation antiviral drugs, DAAs. From a nation with the highest infection rate on Earth, Egypt is now on track to be the first country to completely eliminate hepatitis C. The PAT tragedy in Egypt leaves us with a chilling lesson. In medicine, just like in life, passion and good intentions are not enough. In fact, without extreme caution and complete understanding, good intentions can pave the road to hell. Those glass needles are gone now, but the scar they left on the bodies of millions and on the history of medicine will never fade. It serves as a reminder. Sometimes, the most terrifying thing isn't the monster growling in front of you, but the deadly silence hiding in the hands of the person trying to save you.